On today's episode, is exercise addiction hindering your recovery with Heather Hausenblas. Welcome to the podcast helping you overcome your proximal hamstring tendinopathy. This podcast is designed to help you understand this condition, learn the most effective evidence-based treatments, and of course, bust the widespread misconceptions. My name is Brodie Sharpe. I'm an online physiotherapist, recreational athlete, creator of the Run Smarter series, and a chronic proximal hamstring tendinopathy battler. Whether you are an athlete or not, this podcast will educate and empower you in taking the right steps to overcome this horrible condition. So let's give you the right knowledge along with practical takeaways in today's lesson. I'm excited to bring you this topic today because it is worth reflecting on. I know it is a touchy subject for those who have been really impacted by this, but for most of us, it might just only impact in a very mild way. And I know certainly this particular topic and researching for this topic, it has helped the way I've reflected on my exercise regime and how I structure things. And so let's have a look, because I do know there are a certain amount of people, certain clients that I have seen over the years who believe that it is mandatory to exercise every single day and to do it multiple times a day. And it's really a struggle when what your body's telling you is you might need to rest or you might need to dial down a few notches. And so just highlighting it, bringing it to the forefront. And Heather is a fantastic guest to have on to talk about this topic. This was featured on the Run Smarter podcast, and I am snipping out a few bits, and I won't delve into talk about Heather too much because the start of the clip is her bio, so you'll get to know more about her, and then we'll dive into the interview. So whether this suits you or not, whether you're a lot of people be like, yeah, but I'm not exercising multiple times a day. I don't think I'm addicted to exercise. Similar to me, I don't think I'm addicted to exercise, but learning these sort of topics has definitely helped me and helped my relationship with exercise and my mindset around exercise. And so when it comes to your recovery and your rehab, I think it's a very similar mindset and a very similar aspect that we need to self-reflect on. So hopefully enjoy. Let's dive in. In way of bio, Heather Hausenblas is currently working at Jacksonville University. She is currently a faculty member in the School of Applied Health Science. She was a past Associate Dean at Jacksonville University. She is a physical activity and health aging expert, researcher, and author. She examines the effects of physical activity and diet on body image, mood, adherence, quality of life, and excessive exercise. She is the co-author of 6 books and published over 100 papers. And today's topic is all about exercise addiction. And we delve into so many different topics, one being how to know if it's just exercise addiction or whether you just love exercise and you're just committed to loving the exercise of running, and what can be the potential negative consequences, if there's any personality traits associated with it, how to recognize if there is an addiction, and just we talk about so much things. We go into social media, peer pressure devices. Does that have a detrimental impact, and strategies to help at the end, because we got to have strategies to help, don't we? And I feel like the way Heather answered all these questions was so concise and so informative that you're going to take so much away from it. I am pumped with today's topic. It's going to be extremely different to something I have done in the past. And Heather, I just want to say thanks for coming on to the Run Smarter podcast.
Oh my goodness, thank you for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Okay, so I've got the title being, is exercise addiction detrimental to your running? And I'm excited to dive into some of these subcategories. But before we get into that, can we just take a step back and have an insight into your career and how you gained this interest around exercise addiction?
Yeah, you know what? It's a great question. And when I first became interested in exercise addiction, I want to say it was almost by accident. I was studying exercise adherence. I'm an exercise health psychologist, so studying, exercise behaviors, why people do or don't exercise, mood effects of exercise. And I was actually in discussions with one of my former PhD students, and we were in the process of designing an intervention. So we basically a study to try to get people, a certain group of people to exercise more, because we know that the vast majority of people do not exercise and they're missing out on a whole host of health benefits associated with it. So we were looking, at this whole continuum of exercise from, okay, you've got these people that don't exercise at all, which is the vast majority. You have a few people that are what we would say meeting the exercise guidelines, but we said, what about people who may exercise too much, and can you actually become addicted to exercise? And that was really the thought process. And we thought, well, let's take a look at this and see, because with most behaviors, they can be taken to an extreme, like for example, gambling, where you can have just normal gambling, or you can become addicted to gambling. So the question was, could you actually become addicted to exercise? So our first step, and this is dating back now about 25 years, and I'm also, I guess, dating myself. There wasn't a lot of research done on it, so the field was really open-ended. And what was fascinating is you almost had these two schools of thought, where some researchers were saying that if you were addicted, so-called, to exercise, it was a good thing, and they were calling it a positive addiction, because and the thought behind it was exercise is a good thing. If you exercise a lot or an extreme amount, then that's an even better thing with more health benefits, and they call that a positive addiction. And there's another school of thought saying that no, it's negative. If you're doing something too much and excessively, there's going to be bad things, happening to you. But there really was not a whole host of interest from a scientific community looking at it. So that's really where we started, just from being intrigued by it and trying to understand it. So very early on, just delving into what was actually out there, and then deciding that, okay, we did have a feeling that this was a real thing, and that there was a small group of exercisers that would exercise excessively and could potentially be what we classify as exercise addicted. So as researchers, our first inkling was, well, how do we define this? And then how do we go about to measure it? And that's what we spent several years doing, was trying to develop a measure to actually measure exercise addiction, and then try to define it. And then since this time, there really has been an explosion of research taking a look at exercise addiction, who gets addicted, how you define it, how you measure it, and then how you can potentially treat it. So the research has come a long way. We still have a long way to go, though, but it really is an intriguing and fascinating area, that you can take something that's typically really good for you, and it can become something that can become really bad for you when you do it too much and potentially become addicted to it.
Okay. And did they, I noticed on another podcast that you were on that you said that there was no set definition of exercise addiction yet. Has that changed?
You know what, that's a great question. And I have to say that the definition of it has narrowed, but is there a set definition that all researchers go to? I would say no. And the reason for that is that it's not classified yet as a mental health disorder. So when I say that, we have a diagnostic and statistical manual for mental disorders that classifies all mental health disorders that are out there. And in a few years back, there was finally a new category that said that, you know what, you can become addicted to behaviors. And the first behavior that the manual has acknowledged is gambling, saying that we now acknowledge you can become addicted to gambling. And exercise got a quick mention in it, stating that there's a possibility, but there's still not enough research out there. But the typical definition that most researchers will go to is that it's based on certain types of components, where first and foremost, you need to be exercising what we call excessively. Now, what does excessive mean? For some individuals, that could be 2 hours a day. For other individuals, for example, that could be up to 6, 7, 8 hours a day. So there's a huge range in what we would say would be excessive, because what really determines it is not just the volume of exercise, but the psychological aspects that go along with it. So we take a look at it as really this kind of this craving for what we call like leisure time physical activity, so exercise, something that's done during your so-called free time, that's associated not only with physiological symptoms, because typically when someone's exercising excessively, oftentimes there's overuse, injuries that go along with that, but then also the psychological aspects of it, whether it's, withdrawal effects, extreme tolerance effects, this whole notion of a lack of control and not being able to stop, because typically individuals who we would classify as exercise addicted know that this is an issue. They know that it's a problem, and that they need help, and they just cannot stop.
Okay, a lot to unpack there. When you were talking about that it does have a negative consequence, and you quickly touched on a few mental issues that might happen or some injuries, can you maybe just paint a picture of perhaps like common characteristics of someone who follows into this exercise addiction? Like, is there a common behavior that you might see?
Yeah, there's a few that are really telltale. And from a health standpoint, we're typically interested in getting people to meet the exercise guidelines, and that's really the challenge. And there's a few individuals, and the numbers are low, but just because the prevalence of exercise addiction is low, is typically, we would say around 1 to 3%, let's say, of people who exercise. It doesn't mean that it's not significant and doesn't affect, thousands of individuals. But one of the telltale signs of it is what we call kind of a criteria called continuance. And what I mean by that is being unable to either stop or reduce how intense or long somebody actually exercises. So for example, the average person would be able to, let's say, go to the gym and say, okay, I'm going to work out for an hour, and then I'm going to leave. I've got other obligations. I've got to get home to my family, or I need to get to work. But someone who's exercise addicted may go in with that intention of only exercising for an hour, yet they'll stay a lot longer, and they will give up, family obligations. They would be late for dinner. They'll be late for work. They will give these things up because they need to get their exercise in, and they oftentimes will do a lot longer than they intend. I remember one individual, for example, who I would clearly state was exercise addicted. She ran a marathon, and at the end of the marathon, that was her goal, to complete a marathon, which is an extreme accomplishment. At the end of that marathon, she felt that she still hadn't ran enough, so she kept running. So that would be an example of it. But one of the things that I think is really important to get across to your listeners is, just because somebody does marathons or ultra marathons or Ironmans, for example, or goes hiking all day long, does not mean that this individual is addicted to exercise. It's the ability to stop, the ability to take time off, and the ability to have a balance is where it's really key. Another aspect that you'll see are what we call withdrawal effects, and it's a little unique with exercise when we think of withdrawal effects, because oftentimes individuals or people are exercising because it makes them feel better. It puts them in a better mood. That's been studied in hundreds of different studies, and we know that when people exercise afterwards, they're in a better mood, they have less anxiety, less depression. Well, somebody who is exercise addicted is oftentimes exercising to avoid these types of feelings. They become really intense for the individual. They're spending an extreme amount of time with this. For example, one individual who had participated in one of our studies said that, and he said, I know I exercise too much. I know it's an issue. And he said, and now it's becoming a very expensive issue for me, because he was trying to cover it up, how much he was actually exercising. So he ended up buying 3 or 4 different gym memberships at different gyms. So in the morning early, he'd go to one gym, in the afternoon another gym, and then in the evening another gym. because he did not want the fitness staff to know how much he was, how much he was exercising. So typically these individuals can acknowledge that, hey, I know I'm doing this too much, but I can't stop. And that's really, in part, the telltale sign of what's going on. And also another key issue is continuing to exercise through injuries. So typically, many of us have experienced injuries over over the years, whether it's an overuse injury or you've hurt something or strained something. And you go to your healthcare provider and they tell you to take some time off, whether it's a couple days, a week, a month, whatever it may be. The average person is able to do that to heal their body. Somebody who's exercise addicted is not. They are not able to stop, and they will continue to exercise despite some type of injury. They will exercise through the pain, or they're going to change the type of activity that they're doing, but they're still going to keep the amount that's going on. I had for example, to put it in perspective, a doctor threatened to actually cast somebody's foot that they had an overuse injury, saying, "Is this the only way that I'm going to be able to get you to stop exercising?" So it's really this type of extreme type of behavior. And I really want to get the point across that for the most part, exercise is one of the best things you can do for your overall health. In fact, it's up there, the top 2 to 3 things that you can do from a behavioral standpoint for your health. So it's really important that people know that. But yes, for an extreme, like a small amount of individuals, it does become negative, and it does have extreme negative health effects for individuals, and I would classify them as potentially exercise addicted.
Yeah, and just the topic, like, is exercise addiction detrimental to your running? And you've just listed out a clear list of things that could definitely become detrimental if someone's trying to manage an injury, but they have to exercise, and exacerbates that injury, can set you back from, true like running potential for sure. And
Mhm.
you did list a fair few mental impacts that might manifest itself as well. And I think you briefly touched on kind of not keeping to appointments, not sticking to like family commitments or relationship commitments because they're held up at the gym or running, that sort of thing. Is there any other elements or any other components of someone's daily life that might be impacted if they are addicted to exercise?
Yeah, these are kind of like the key things. You're giving up your whether it's your work obligations or your family obligations. If you haven't exercised, then you may say, okay, I'm not showing up for the family dinner, or I'm going to show up late because I need to get this in. Because really, it becomes the top priority for the individual. Also, what you begin to see are a narrowing of interests, and oftentimes a lot of the interests tend to focus around exercise or around the activity that they're doing. So if they're not actually exercising, they may be reading about it or watching YouTube videos on it. So it really takes up a huge amount of their day. Even if they're not physically out there exercising, oftentimes they're thinking about it or getting themselves ready for that activity. And there's also this feeling of a loss of control, that they cannot, for whatever reason, reduce how much they're exercising, whether it's the duration or the intensity, the intensity of it. And they tend to have good intentions, oftentimes saying, okay, I'm only going to, let's say go for a 10-mile run. But they, for whatever reason, even though they intend to only do that, oftentimes they will exercise longer than they've actually planned plan to do, and they'll try to fit it in throughout the day as well. I had interviewed a woman who I would classify as exercise addicted, and she said that even when, for example, she would go to the bathroom, she would be in the bathroom doing squats and doing wall push-ups, and then when she would be sitting down, she would be constantly fidgeting, because she felt that this type of movement was going to help for her overall exercise. So it's really trying, almost this obsession, trying to fit it in wherever you possibly can.
Wow, that's very extreme.
You know what? It is. It really it is. And you're thinking about, individuals who really it's an obsession and a compulsion where they're constantly thinking about it and this constant need to move and to do it more and more. And it's important to note that try to make a distinction because for example, I often will be asked, about athletes, and because athletes typically, depending upon their level, are training an extreme amount. And does this mean that every athlete is addicted to exercise? No, by no means at all. They've got very specific goals and reasons for why they're doing that type of training. And typically, most athletes are look forward to a day off, are able to take time off. And if they have an overuse injury, they will stop and maybe do other types of activities. Now, it's not to state that someone who's an athlete can't be exercise addicted. They certainly can, but you need to take a look at the whole context of what's going on. And it's important to make a distinction between, in the literature, what we, from a science standpoint, where we try to provide a distinction between primary exercise addiction and then what we call secondary exercise addiction. So primary exercise addiction is in part largely what we've been talking about. For at the start of this podcast, secondary exercise addiction is when somebody is exercising excessively, but it's secondary to an eating disorder, because one of the components or potential components of an eating disorder is excessive exercise, which is used either to try to lose weight or to maintain weight. So really to burn calories. So it's important to kind of provide that distinction. Because if somebody has secondary exercise dependence, their excessive exercise is secondary to their eating disorder. So it's a method for them to try to control or maintain their weight. And to put it into perspective, for example, one individual that I had interviewed had secondary exercise dependence. So she had an eating disorder, and she would spend or try to spend most of her day doing any types of movements possible to try to lose weight or maintain her weight. So when she was sitting, she would be constantly fidgeting. When she was just standing, she would be, doing toe raises. For example, she'd even tap her fingers constantly. Anything that she could do to try to get rid of extra calories through even these small types of movement. So it's important to know kind of that there's two distinct kind of categories of exercise addiction also.
Very interesting. And when I think about the activities that someone could participate in, I think about running, and I think probably like the gym goers, just because it's kind of like an open-ended activity, and those with exercise addiction can kind of just it's just open-ended. They can just keep going and going and going. And you did draw a couple of examples with gym goers. Do you see any other activities or any other examples where someone can be addicted? Because if I think about team sports, like you play that team sport and then that game is over, and there's like an end point where you stop, you shake hands, and you go home. Are there any other common activities that you see people get addicted to?
It's a really good question. And you bring up kind of the team sports versus more of the individual sports. And typically with, individual sports or individual activities, potentially more of these endurance types activities where we come back to let's say biking, and running, we tend to see more or a larger prevalence of exercise addiction within those types of activities, because you don't need to rely on other individuals necessarily to be able to go out and do this. If you're playing a team sport, then you have to rely on your teammates to be able to engage in that activity, unless you're going and training by yourself. But it tends to be more so with these with the individual types of activities and more of the endurance types of activities that we see more of what we classify exercise addiction. But you still see it, for example, in the team type of activities. It's common also, for example, in bodybuilding as well, and in weight training, that you see a larger prevalence occurring.
Okay. I want to dive into like personality traits because this is what I'm extremely interested in. And I do know in past research, there has been some links between personality types and someone developing an injury, and whether that be the type of personality that is like type A, like perfectionist, who would have, you know, extremely high standards for themselves, push themselves, less likely to take rest days, that sort of self-driven, self-motivated personality. And that's what makes me think, is there an underlying personality that is more likely to become addicted to exercise because they elicit these same personality traits? Has there been any studies done or any research done, or in your opinion, are there any characteristics or personality traits that might lead someone to become exercise addicted?
You know what? It's a great question, and personality, just in general, is a fascinating area to take a look at. And researchers have looked at just regular exercisers. Is there a certain personality or certain personality traits where individuals are more likely to exercise? And yes, the research has found that, and there has been some research also taking a look at exercise addiction, and are there certain personality traits that maybe kind of differentiate. And yes, we do find that, and it's coming back to and personality in and of itself is really difficult to define and measure. But most of the research has taken a look at what we call the big five personality traits, which consist of extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and what we call openness to experience. So everybody falls along those five big traits, whether they're high or low, or right in the middle. And what the research finds is that individuals who tend to be high on extroversion. So extroversion is characterized by having a lot of energy, being a little bit more outgoing, potentially enjoying being with groups, finding that tends to be individuals who tend to score or tend to be more extroverted or more likely to have exercise addiction, and also individuals who score higher on neuroticism. So neuroticism tends to be individuals who are a little bit more obsessive, a little bit more compulsive, tend to have mood swings a little bit more easily. So maybe going from happy to sad, quite quickly. So we do know that individuals who score high on neuroticism are also more likely to be exercise dependent, and individuals who score low on the personality trait of agreeableness. So, and it's kind of inherent within the title of it, but individuals who are low on agreeableness tend to be more argumentative, more confrontational, less likely to get along with individuals. So by saying all of that, yes, there are some personality traits, and typically your personality traits, you can't really change them. They become fairly ingrained by the time we're in our late teens, early 20s. So kind of the telltale ones are individuals who are higher on neuroticism and higher on extroversion and lower on agreeableness tend to be more at risk or more likely to be exercise addicted.
I have a scenario I want to run by you because this is something that I see myself. I often, like in the early days of the podcast, or when I was appearing guests on other podcasts, I constantly said that sometimes runners don't make the right decisions. Sometimes they make stupid decisions, especially when it comes to injury, and they would tend to run on a certain injury, make it worse. And then once they're unable to run because it's so bad, that's when they'd see a physio. But I had a bit of backlash, and several runners come to me and be like, Brodie, you don't understand. Like, I might be injured, but running is my only kind of positive mental health like outlet. It's the only thing that gets me going. Like, I've got a busy life. I have to look after my kids. I've got such it's constantly going. It's constantly stressful, and running is the only stress relief that I have. And I can't take that away. I can't replace that with something else. And so when I'm injured, it's my only outlet. So I need to continue running. Well, my question was going to be like, is that kind of on the similar grounds to exercise addiction? But what you're saying earlier, if kind of like a loose definition, if you're unable to stop or reduce this
Mhm.
exercise, then you might argue that this is kind of a similar trait to exercise addiction.
You know what? That's fascinating. And yeah, I could see how you get backlash, from this, and it's challenging because we have, these inventories, these self-report inventories that will have individuals complete, and if they're scoring high, then we'll say, okay, they may be at risk for exercise addiction. The only way to really know is then you have to do like an interview with them, with a mental health counselor to actually see what are the driving forces. And I would say, these individuals, it would be difficult unless they go through, an interview to actually know specifically whether I'd say they're just extremely committed exercisers or they're actually exercise addicted, because you can be really committed to it. And if all of a sudden you're not able to do it or it's taken away, whether you're addicted or just a regular exerciser, you're still going to miss it, right? Because it's part of your daily routine. It's, sure, it's going to be potentially a coping mechanism, because even if you're a regular exerciser, oftentimes people are drawn to exercise and keep with it because it puts them in a better mood, and it gets rid of their stress and their anxiety. So that's really the challenge because it's not just all of a sudden they go from being a regular exerciser to, boom, they're exercise, addicted. There's kind of this fine line that goes on. And I would say for these individuals, potentially they're just really committed exercisers, and all of a sudden they're not able to do something that they have done maybe, for years, years on end, and all of a sudden they're not able to. They're certainly going to miss it. But if they're addicted to it, then they're not going to be able to cope, right, with their day. They may continue to engage in excessive exercise, through the pain, and that's really kind of the telltale signs. And I've had several, for example, several of my even my friends, for example, who over time they get an overuse injury. I can see some of them are able to take time off, others are not, and then the injury becomes even worse. And those are the individuals that I become concerned about, because they're not able to take that time off. And they'll say, like what what you've encountered, that I'm a busy person. All I have is 45 minutes in the day, and this is potentially my social time with my friends as well, and I'm just not willing to, I'm not willing to give it up. So it becomes really difficult to actually pinpoint where that trigger is and where that tipping point is, going from regular exercise to excessive to potentially addicted.
I'm glad you bring that point up, because I think a lot of people will be listening to this and know a friend who they think is exercise addicted, who goes to gym every day and just is constantly working out, but in reality they might just be committed. And
Mhm.
I think potentially, like, if this exercise addiction term is rippling into the running community, it might actually be overused. Oh yeah, they're exercise addicted. Oh yeah, they're exercise addicted, when in fact it might be just a habit. Like, they're just the exercise itself, they're just fully committed. But the tipping point might be to, like you're saying, that those negative consequences start to pile up, and the ability to, or the inability to stop that exercise, is when it starts to tip over into that addiction spectrum.
Yeah, that's exactly. You bring up an excellent point, as that the term is probably overused, right? Oh, that person's addicted to exercise because maybe they exercise every day. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with exercising every day. It's probably for most people, it's a really healthy, it's a really healthy thing. It's an important to prioritize it in your day and to try to fit it in because of all of the health benefits. But it's for those small few that it does, cross the line, and they are unable to stop. And I've known individuals that have participated in some of our studies that have lost their jobs, lost their occupation, because they're showing up late to work, or they're leaving early, or their lunch break becomes longer and longer because they need to exercise. And these are, some of the telltale signs, that are going on. Like, for example, this morning, my person that I was going to run with texted me that she didn't sleep well and she wasn't going to run. And, so I thought about going by myself, but I didn't. And, I can feel it during the day because in part, I exercise because, yeah, it's a social aspect, but it also relieves my anxiety, my stress, and puts me in a better mood. And I could tell that I was just a little off today because I didn't go for my, morning half hour run. Am I exercise addicted? No, but I certainly do miss it when I didn't do it, but it doesn't affect me to that absolute level. So I think it's important for people to know that if you exercise, regularly, and, if you take a day or two off, you're probably going to feel it and you're probably going to miss it a little bit because it's something that you do on a continual basis, but that's okay. It's when it's taken to the extreme. So individuals who I say are exercise addicted, and, let's say, for example, they're on a flight and they're flying somewhere and their flight is delayed and they're stuck, on the tarmac, for hours on end, and they're not able to exercise. They are going to experience what we classify as extreme withdrawal effects. They are going to be extremely agitated and irritated. They'll probably have a hard time concentrating and functioning because they haven't been able to exercise. Whereas the average person would probably be annoyed because they're on the plane for so long, but it wouldn't affect them to that extreme level.
Yeah, super interesting. I'm loving every topic of this. I did have written down, actually, I might just dive into this. Are there any questions that someone might ask themselves or ways they can identify if they are addicted to exercise? Like perhaps maybe some questions to self-reflect on?
Yeah, I think, the kind of the key, aspects when we're taking a look at it is not necessarily, the amount of time, but are you giving up, whether it's, social, like, obligations with family, friends, and work? Are you beginning to give those up so that you can get your exercise in? Are you exercising typically longer, or at a higher intensity than you typically intend to do? And are you exercising through injuries as well? Basically the inability to take a day off or take 2 days off. And I know there's individuals, and you'll see these websites of, well, I have run for the last, 500 days in a row. Well, that just because someone does that doesn't mean that they're exercise addicted. They could be extremely goal oriented, and very strategic, and be very conscientious, and that's okay. It's if these individuals who, let's say, ran 500 days straight, and got injured, are they able then to take the time off? That's the key aspect. So I really want to get across that just because you're a committed exerciser does not by no means mean that you are addicted to exercise.
Yeah. And do you ever see any external influences? Like, do you ever come across maybe social media, like peer pressure, like certain devices, Strava, all these sort of things have an impact on exercise addiction?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the social media now that's out there, what we call the Fitspirations or the Fitspo. So it be an image of someone typically who's, hyper fit, and then some like caption basically saying, something extreme, like, work through the pain, never take a day off, just these extreme types of messages are really giving the average person the wrong message about exercise, because for the most part, we should be doing it for largely for health related reasons. And these images with these hyper fit individuals, that represents, those types of bodies are on, about 1%, 1% of the population, because not only do you need to be extremely fit, but you need to also be extremely thin as well. And that may not necessarily be healthy. And what's fascinating is studies that have shown individuals those types of image, those Fitspirations, and then ask these individuals, how they feel about exercise and how their mood is, it is continually found that after individuals take a look at these Fitspirations, it actually has the opposite effect, because individuals feel demoralized, they're in a worse mood, they're more anxious, because they take a look at these images and say, I can't achieve this, or this is what you need to look like to be healthy. So yes, I would say that like these types of images, and it's difficult, but people need to realize that for the most part, they're not realistic. And, at a minimum, try to hit the, the fitness or the physical activity, guidelines of trying to, exercise almost every day for about, at least 30 minutes, and try to stand more during the day to be, to be healthy. And that's really that's really ultimately the goal.
Okay. And following on from like social media and devices, that kind of thing, do you see any common patterns with demographics, age, gender, culture, any similarities?
Yeah, you're going to see it more in, younger individuals that are on social media all the time, whether it's, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, where they're bombarded, with these images. And we do know that the longer somebody spends on their phone or on their device looking at these types of images, the worse mood they're going to be, and less in touch really with, with reality, because this is not, what you often see out there is not necessarily the reality. So I would encourage individuals to get off their devices and just get out there and get outside and go for a walk or a run or whatever, whatever activity they may want to do. And we're living in an age now where there is so much technology associated with fitness. And I see so many people out there, whether it's with a Fitbit or they're exercising with their phone, that will track, the distance that they have gone. And that can be good or bad, right? When individuals take it to an extreme and say, well, yesterday I got 15,000 steps in, and today I need to get more. And then it's this always trying to build on what they have done the day before. For certain individuals, that can become detrimental as well.
Okay, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. And when we're talking about, say, measuring your like health metrics, like looking at your watch and seeing how far you've gone, how fast you've gone, what your heart rate's been like, your heart rate zones, how many calories you've burned, how many steps you're doing. Do you think someone who is addicted to exercise, do you think that device and following those numbers can be detrimental? Or if that device is taken away and they just exercise without that, they're just going to do exactly the same thing? Like, is the watch and the data kind of feeding this addiction?
You know what? It can potentially can, when it becomes that obsession, and they're always looking at the numbers and needing to have that type of feedback. Then that's when it certainly can become detrimental. And one of the challenges with somebody who may be, exercise addicted or engaging in excessive exercise is you don't want them to not like stop doing it, right? Because exercise is one of the best things you can do for your health. So it's really almost reframing how they think about the exercise to bring it back to a level that is a healthy level. And this is one of the challenges that we see with exercise, as opposed to other types of addictions. Let's say whether it's alcohol or drugs, for example, where you try to, or smoking, where you try to do abstinence and not doing it at all. We don't want to accomplish that, right, with exercise. So it's really a challenge to say you need to cut back, but we still want you to do it. And that's really the challenge, because then they'll say, okay, well, I'm going to cut back, but then they'll go and do it, and then they want to do it even more. So that's one of the challenges with this type of addiction.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is like identifying, like, when does good become bad? When does like the data, the social media, when is it helpful? When is it unhelpful? And I think that's where self-reflection really does come into it, and like asking yourself these questions, or potentially taking a step back and looking back over the last 6 months, 12 months and think, okay, have I been running through an injury? Why am I running through an injury? Or am I constantly pushing further and further and further, and my other obligations and commitments are becoming a sacrifice? And because they might not be able to see it in that moment, they might not be able to look over the past couple of days or past couple of weeks and see a pattern. But then once they take a step back and see what's progressed over months and months and months, that's when they might see the level of importance, or it might be teetering into an addiction. And they might not be able to get the sense of magnitude of what the how detrimental it could be. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that, because oftentimes these individuals, they may lack a self-awareness to know that they're actually doing it too much, or maybe it's a gradual, buildup over the course of a year or two, where they continue to exercise more and more. And that's where, their close friends and family, or maybe individuals that they work with, are, be able to say, hey, I think that, this is taken to an extreme. But it's the question of, do they even want to hear it? Like, for example, I had a student, and this is dating back years ago, in one of my graduate classes, and it was a 3-hour class. So we'd give periodic breaks for the students, and also for myself. And I had one student that, when we would have a 5-10 minute break, would actually go for a run, and sprint and do like sit-ups and push-ups, and and that could potentially be okay. But this individual was also exercising before class and after class and first thing in the morning. So it was like every time this person could move, the person would move, and would try to move like excessively. So, and this individual didn't have self-awareness that this was actually an issue, until some of the classmates actually pointed it out to her, and then kind of helping her to reframe how she thought about exercise, and bringing it down to a level that was healthier.
That takes us perfectly into our last kind of question or segment, which would be strategies to help. What could we do? And I understand that a tailored approach would be like beneficial. Like, everyone would be different, and tailoring a strategy would be different for everyone. But you did briefly talk a couple of times about this reframing what this exercise is, and potentially pulling back if possible. Are there any other strategies that could help, or just like generic strategies that could help exercise addiction?
Yeah, I think, what's critical is creating the awareness. I would highly encourage somebody who thinks that they maybe exercising too much or exercise addicted, to seek help with a clinical mental health counselor. And it's important to take a note of what's the distinction between like primary exercise addiction and secondary exercise addiction. I would say if somebody has secondary exercise addiction, so that they have an eating disorder, then they certainly need to go and get help for the eating disorder, first and foremost, right? Because that's the critical, really the critical aspect. And hopefully then the excessive exercise will also, taper off to a more reasonable effect. But I would clearly say, if someone thinks that they may have an issue, that first and foremost, they should seek out professional counseling for it.
Okay. Are there any questionnaires that exist that we could potentially like quantify, a certain level, or maybe a possibility of exercise addiction in the future?
Yeah, definitely. There's a few self-report assessments that have been, studied by scientists, and are validated, that have like cutoffs for whether somebody, what we'd say, would be at risk for exercise addiction. And I can certainly share those with you if you'd want to share those with your listeners. There's one called the exercise. It's actually called the Exercise Addiction Inventory, which is a really brief inventory that's very quick to score, that will give you a cutoff as to whether you may be at risk. Another one that's used a lot is the exercise dependence scale as well, which is kind of touching upon, these issues with, are you spending a lot of time exercising? Are you not able to stop? Are you giving up, obligations with your friends and family? And really also cognitive aspects, and how the individuals think about the exercise as well. So yes, I can share those if that would be helpful.
Am I able just to Google it, look it up on the internet?
You can probably Google, one of them is what I would recommend would be the Exercise Addiction Inventory, or the Exercise Dependence Scale. And you should be able to pull those up if you Google them.
Yeah, I think I'll look them up and then I'll just add them to the show notes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll have a look. That'll be very, very helpful. Heather, this has been incredible. I think this is something that hasn't been discussed. Like I've been working with runners for such a long period of time, and I actually haven't ventured into the topic of exercise addiction. And it has been super insightful. I've learned from every single question that I've asked. Before we finish up, are there any other takeaway messages or advice you like to give to athletes that we haven't touched on yet?
You know what? I think, I really enjoyed talking with you and sharing, the knowledge that I've, learned over the last, 25 years. I think for the most part, to get it out to your listeners that exercise and moving, whatever that may be, is one of the most important things you can do for your overall health. But anything, whatever it is, we can take it to an extreme and it can become unhealthy. And for people to have awareness to know that there is, for certain individuals, that type of tipping point where it can become too much and then it becomes unhealthy. And the sooner that individuals can get help for it, the better that they'll be.
Yeah. And when I think about addiction, there's drug, alcohol, like gambling, like you said, and everything just contains some sort of dopamine hit or some sort of thing that makes you feel good. And exercise is exactly the same in that effect. And like anything that has that hit of dopamine, it can be excessive and it can start to have negative consequences. And I think just raising awareness around exercise addiction is a super helpful thing because people might be able to identify it in themselves or be able to flag it in others and perhaps like to start asking some questions and start bringing that awareness to people's like consciousness. And I want to thank you for coming on and the years and years of research you've done on this topic because you're helping a lot of people. So thanks for sharing your knowledge and thanks for coming on.